Hi, soul friends. It's Tanasa Sampour, and welcome back to another episode of the Minutes on Growth podcast. Today, we have two special guests with us. For those of you who have been listening to the podcast, you know that I love the integration of psychology and spirituality. And when I saw that their podcast is literally that, I was like, oh my God, we need to have them on the podcast. The Spiritual Sisters, they have the Spiritual Sisters podcast. Gabby, who is an intuitive astrologer, and Nicole, a licensed marriage and family therapist. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you for
Thank you for
having
having
us.
us. Get a two for one today.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it because I have this conversation often with my mom, and we talk about which medium is more powerful for healing. Is it spirituality and is it psychology? And we've come to this conclusion that it's the integration of both. For us, psychology without spirituality doesn't give us the the faith element, the trust in something bigger than us, and the sense of I'm supported by the universe. And spirituality without psychology for us feels like, okay, we don't have the tools to navigate this self-awareness. So I love that you both are here. In your opinion, how do they overlap? Do they
Oh,
overlap?
Nicole, you go first.
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Yep.
Okay, so for me, I think they overlap. It's almost like psychology helped to keep me grounded in reality when I was starting my spiritual journey. And I think without that, I think a lot of people, and Gabby can probably attest to this and speak to it. Like when you're going through it, you just feel like you're going crazy
Mhm.
and like you're losing your mind and you're hearing things and you're seeing things and just these weird things are happening. But I felt like psychology was like kind of what kept me rooted in okay, what is what is a spiritual experience versus like what might be a little bit of like delusion popping in, right? So with my therapist hat, I was always trying to stay very balanced and okay, I know that this is real, but I also know that this is real. And I think that that is sometimes what's missing. And either sometimes people think that they are going crazy, or sometimes people might be really experiencing something that needs like medical attention by like a licensed healthcare provider, but they don't see that because they're so into the other parts of it. So for me, it's like a balance, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
I love that.
Mm.
So on the one, like this energy of groundedness comes from psychology, and then the expansiveness comes from spirituality.
Yeah, definitely. And for me at least, right? I can't speak to everybody else's experience, but for me, because I did have so much like background and experience with that, that was what really helped for me. And even when I'm working with people now in a coaching capacity or even in a therapeutic capacity, just really trying to honor what is their spiritual experience and also taking a look at, okay, and let's make sure that we don't have this other stuff going on just to be safe. So that way they can really dive into the spiritual piece and feel very comfortable and confident knowing that, okay, like I am okay. I'm not, I don't need to be diagnosed with anything. Like I'm all good. I'm just having my spiritual awakening. I'm experiencing my, my spirituality and, I'm a human here having a spiritual experience, I think.
Mm.
I love that.
Yeah.
Gabby, what's
Yeah.
your experience been like?
So thank you for asking. Yeah, so I've spoken to this a couple times on the podcast, especially in the earlier episodes. So I went through this whole thing called the Saturn return, and I feel like I was now looking back, I was like, was I the first one in the family to really go through the spiritual awakening? And I think the OG, much like your mom is the OG, I think that was our dad. And he had always really kept this stuff to himself. And I don't think he really spoke to it until I kind of came out after my Saturn return or during my Saturn return, which is that like time from ages 28 to 30 where you're just kind of initiated into astrologically speaking into adulthood. And I was like, something's happening. I don't know what it is. None of this makes sense. And it really kind of ushered me into the spiritual awakening. And I was going through it, and Nicole was like, you should consider therapy. And I went to therapy. And so I'm a sacral generator, and everything in my body rejected what, not to say that those practices weren't valid because I totally think that they are. It's just not what I needed or was seeking at the time. And I knew my body was like, this is not it. This is something bigger than what can be explained. And I would love to hear Nicole's take on this too, because I think she's kind of like, oh yeah, I can kind of see you, but I don't want to speak for her. But I found myself being able to manipulate my therapist, which is like shadow side of a Cancer, which we're both Cancers, we're actually born on the same day, and we just celebrated our birthday, but at time of recording, and I just was kind of like, yeah, this isn't it. Like I'm seeking something deeper, something a little bit more evolved. And I recognized that that was my spiritual awakening. However, I do think the way that Nicole explained it with respect to the therapy side, being able to ground oneself, um, I think that's so valid and that's such a great way to explain it. But for me, I was looking to not be grounded at that time. And that's what I needed for my specific journey. And that's how astrology supported me.
Ooh, I love that because what you're kind of weaving us into this topic of astrology can be used not only as a tool for like, predicting the future, but also as a tool for self-inquiry and self-awareness.
Absolutely. And yesterday was interesting. This is not good for the subconscious mind, but my dirty, like little secret, I guess, or way that I like kind of just like to indulge myself is I'll scroll through the tickety talk right before I go to bed. And it's like the worst time to
Oh,
do
it's like the
it.
worst thing to
It's
do.
the worst thing. And I know it, but I can't get enough of it. Right. And I was listening to this. His name's Daryl. His last name starts with an A. And he's this man, he's been channeling his ET friend Bashar for close to 40 years. And he was talking about his contracts. And I was like, oh, yeah, it just kind of clicked. Like I had always explained that astrology was your roadmap for your incarnation in this lifetime. But really, what your astrological birth chart is, it's your soul contract. Like this is what you agreed to do, what you signed up for. So for me, I really found that astrology, that was the first tool, the modality that really helped me understand WTF was going on for me at the time when I really felt like I was losing my mind, but like I knew I wasn't losing my mind, if that makes sense.
Okay, so this contract that you're talking about, can you like open it up for people who might not have heard this term before? And, what is a birth chart and how can a birth chart highlight patterns? Can it?
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really good way to blend in the area of work that Nicole does too. So to set the foundation and the context for it. So your birth chart is based on the exact time, date, and place of birth, and that's how you can cast your chart, and it's specific to you based on that information. And what it's going to give you literally all types of characteristics, references, skill sets that you essentially incarnated into in this lifetime. I can even speak to, I'm thinking about specifically, it's called the 12th house in a chart.
Mm.
It can speak to maybe your relationship to the divine, to the psychic realm, to divination, to mental health. It's the mental health house. And it's almost kind of like depending on where those planets fall inside that chart, that's kind of what you agreed. That's you contracted to work with those energies, to understand those energies better, to move through those energies. So as your soul could evolve in this incarnation, in this lifetime. And yeah, that's the contract, if you will, that you signed based off of what you incarnated with and the birth chart that you have.
I love that. Nicole, where do you stand with birth charts and, using astrology as a tool for self-awareness?
So when Gabby first started working with birth charts, I was one of the guinea pigs, and it was so fun, and it was so good. It was really accurate. I still don't quite understand a lot of the terminology when people are like, "What is today's like a Jupiter
Yeah.
Kazemi
Yeah.
something?" And I don't know what that means. There's still a lot of things I don't understand, but I think it was really accurate, and I think it really speaks to, yeah, to just it made a lot of sense. It almost we haven't really talked about it, but human design.
Mm.
I almost feel like the two together are really helpful because I also felt like human design wasn't necessarily like telling me anything that I didn't already know. It was kind of like confirming, and it said sometimes to be like the permission slip for whatever it is that you might be experiencing that's different. So for some people, maybe they don't work very well in the traditional 9 to 5, sleep from 10 a.m. to 6 a.m., right? Maybe they're someone that is, you know what, I'm most productive at 3 in the morning and I need to sleep during the middle of the day. And we might look at them like, well, that's not how things work, right? But human design is going to say, but based on your birth date, location, time, and all that, this is how it works for you. So I almost feel like the two of them together are really, really helpful. I did find the birth chart to give me a lot of information and a lot of insight into things that had happened. So, like, for example, my Saturn return, I had already passed it by the time I had my birth chart reading, but it made a lot of sense. Like, oh, that's what was happening during that time. And then also for it to kind of pick up other things. But let me pause there because I actually don't even know if it's the birth chart that's picking it up or if it's my sister. Because as you
Mm.
said, she's an intuitive astrologer. So I don't know how much of it is written in the stars and how much of it was, and she read it from my chart versus how much of it she picked up intuitively
Or new,
or just
being
knew.
related.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, but
So,
things out that hadn't happened yet, right? Like
mm,
possible deaths and, just things that hadn't happened or that we wouldn't know would happen, I guess.
So here's my question. I completely on board with both of you. I've had my chart read multiple times through different I've had like Vedic chart readings, I've had like Western chart readings, all anything that existed, I've
Hmm.
had it read.
Hmm.
And the central theme in all of them has been that my part of my soul contract is detachment, learning and mastering the art of detachment. And the wildest like stories and life quakes have happened in my life that, if I wrote a book about it, people would think this is fiction, like it only happens in the movies, all on detachment. But here's my question, and I'm voicing, I think, the question of many skeptics. Is that part of my contract or is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if I have thoughts on it only because I personally even struggle with the whole concept of fate versus free will
Hmm.
and how much of that I mean, if you really think about it, it can just kind of send you down a rabbit hole and you can just keep looping. You're just like, what is true? What is not true? So I do believe that what is meant for you, it can't miss you. But I feel like there's probably a little bit of both involved. Like, how could there not be, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say it's probably a
Do you
combination
have
of
thoughts, Nicole?
both. Yeah, I think it's a combination of
Yeah.
both for sure. I think there has been talk about, you come into the world with, these contracts and these agreements. And okay, well, does it mean then that I have to like that this is kind of just set for me, or can I choose to change this? So I think that's a hard part is I think sometimes people say, you know what, I maybe came in to do this, but I want to do something different. And how can I change that? So I think that's where the free will comes in. Like maybe you were destined to do something, but along the way you're like, you know what? Nope, I don't want to do that. My free will is telling me that I want to do something bigger and greater. And I think yeah, I think there's like a little bit of both. I think there's a fine line there. Excuse me. I
Mm.
think there's a fine line.
Yeah, it makes sense because, for example, my mom, she's had her chart read, and in none of her charts was there divorce, but she did get separated from my dad. And always the astrologers are telling her, like, that was your free will to change the blueprint and to shift into and here I want to introduce a new topic, parallel timelines. What are your thoughts on that? Because sometimes I notice that too, of like, I think the first time I read about destiny and fate was Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, and how he said maktub, like it's written. And then I was like, okay, but then what about my free will? And then I started to get curious with it and research it more. And I started to learn, oh, there's like time is an illusion. Multiple versions of our life is happening at the same time. And when we make certain decisions, we're jumping timelines. So that's my perspective, but I'm curious about your take on it.
Can I start, Nick? Are you good with that? I need Nicole's input too, but this has been quite literally the most recent experience. So I just want to say, Nicole, you and I need a little phone chat after this because so
Okay.
I also want to share that our podcast actually started as a result of us literally having hour-long conversations and Nicole came up with the ideas. So I'm like, yeah, we got to get back to that. But anyways, I think timelines is actually something that's like really fresh of mind because I've never seen timelines shift as quickly as they have and seen as many of my clients experience multiple predicted timelines in 1 year. And I feel like that's been 2025. And I
Mhm.
was just telling Nicole, I was like, yeah, like, this was supposed to happen. And I read for myself at the beginning of the year. And I saw a really cool opportunity come forth in June. And like, I usually go month by month in my predictive readings. And that's more from an intuitive perspective than it is from the astrological component. And all this to say, I'm just like, wow, you can really be living out like multiple timelines at once. And I think it also just depends, I guess, maybe a little bit on, and this, I'm just coming to this conclusion in the last like couple of days, how maybe expanded you might be in terms of your consciousness. But I also think it's maybe if you're, say, looking for a partner, you're ready to meet a partner, it depends on like where they're at on their journey and their free will, if that's something that, say, was predicted in one timeline. So I think it's kind of convoluted. I think you can be living out multiple timelines at once. I think there is such a thing as being on just one timeline as well. But I think multiple realities existing at the same time is such a thing.
I think that it is too complex for me to still wrap my head around.
Mm.
There was this show years ago. It was called Castle Rock. I don't know if you ever heard of it or saw it. Okay, so it was basically based off of a Stephen King, either a novel or just his work in general. It might have been a novel. And that was where I first kind of came across the idea of parallel timelines and parallel universes and things like that. And it just it like blew my mind in a way that I'm like, I can't wrap my head around this. This is so confusing. And there is so much talk though about parallel timeline and universes and multiverse and all of those things. And I'm like, I understand it sort of, but not really. Like it kind of reminds me also of like the butterfly effect, right? So there's so many different timelines that we could be living on. If I chose to go left instead of going right, now I'm on a different timeline. And if I choose to wake up and have oatmeal for breakfast, I'm on a different timeline than if I chose to have eggs. Like it's just there's so many different possibilities that I honestly it kind of like blows my mind and I have a hard time like wrapping my head around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like you feel like you know a lot, but like you know nothing at all. And that's
Yes.
literally the basis of this work. Like you're just like,
Mhm.
when does the rabbit hole end? And it doesn't.
It really doesn't. Because the like every step you take, you realize, oh my God, there's a whole door behind this whole hallway of
Mhm.
untapped inside consciousness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I started to think about these timelines when it came to money. And I was thinking of like quantum leaping and how time, there's this narrative of you got to work hard for your whole life, right? But then you enter into these altered state of consciousness. And I'm not talking about drugs or anything. I'm talking about meditation and hypnosis and using those mediums. And you're able to visualize certain outcomes. And just naturally, I noticed, like I've played around with this on days that I do enter into those states and I do visualize certain outcomes, like the universe surprises me with opportunities for money. And that itself scares me. And then I like stop doing it for a while and I'm like, oh my God, the mind, the energy is so powerful.
Mhm.
But it's so interesting because if I have this belief system that I got to work super hard, and we saw this in the Industrial Revolution of you got to work these long hours so that they could convince people to work these long hours in factories and kind of just shifted, this narrative. And now we're saying, no, you don't need to work hard, you need to work smart. Like constantly we're seeing these shifts. And so that for me is like, okay, quantum leaping, I've tried it, it works. But does it work because I think it works, or does it really work?
Well, I think yes to both of those questions, right? It works because you believe it and it works because it works. If somebody doesn't believe it, it's not going to work for them, right? But
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it
Mm,
doesn't work. So I think it can be both. And I think in order to quantum leap in that way, you have to believe it. And then therefore there's your evidence that it works.
yeah. Gabby, what's your thought on it?
Yeah, I agree with that, especially from like a subconscious programming perspective and everything I'm learning on that side of the world, which is more like Nicole's line of work and her area of expertise. I also think too, I'm kind of like me personally being more of like a highly predictive psychic than anything else. It's like how much of, because like I think back on this, and one, I was very curious, and that's how I got into this work. But two, I'm naturally controlling, and that is something that I'm really trying to work on within myself. It's something that I'm trying to heal within like the lineage. And it's something that as a Cancer, I'm just like, I'm pretty sure water signs just kind of came into this world with that trait. So, anyways, I'm speaking for myself here. But right now, where I'm at in my life, I'm like, how much do I want to manifest and how much of it is related
Mhm.
to control and how much of it am I okay with just not knowing and being surprised and like allowing the universe to really show me like how good can it be. So that's kind of where I'm just like, wait, and that's like one of those other like doors down the rabbit hole that you can really like go into. And yeah, and it's like, well, how much of it are you just like okay with being in the divine feminine, if you will, and the unknown? And yeah, so it's kind of a mind f if you really get into it. So I do agree with the whole subconscious programming aspect of it. But right now, where I'm at with it in my personal journey, I'm kind of okay with just being surprised and just trusting that, you know, my guides and the divine has me.
Mm. I love that. So I'm curious, both like one is an astrologer, one is more on the psychology side of it. And you've come together with both of you being curious and wanting to dive into some of these really complex concepts. How has the podcast helped you both grow as sisters? Has it deepened your connection? How has it served as a container for you both?
Can I start?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think like throughout doing the podcast, I've learned a lot about how Nicole like processes information, how she thinks, but I also really appreciate her grounded perspective because for me, I don't naturally feel very grounded and her alternative perspectives, her opinions are just like, oh yeah, like I would have never thought of it that way. And so I think I'm more rigid for sure, I would say. So I really appreciate her insight because it's grounded and it's practical, even though sometimes she may not feel grounded herself.
Yeah, I think for me, the podcast has served its purpose. The whole point of it for me was to be able to learn and to get more information about spiritual practices and just the whole world. So, like, I had no idea. I had never heard of human design, up until what, like a year and a half ago, maybe. And I'm obsessed with human design. There were so many things I didn't know. I didn't know anything about soul contracts. And now I think they're so fascinating. So, for me, the podcast really served its purpose in that way, like what it was intended to do. And I think for me and Gabby, we were already so close that like I can't say like, oh, it brought us closer together because I mean, like she said, we were having hour-long conversations every day. So it was just, yeah, it I think it didn't change our relationship in that way, but it served the purpose for what I wanted it to be.
Hmm. I love that. I just had a thought come to me. You're both born on the same day, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yet you're so different.
We're so similar and we're so different in a lot of ways. Yeah.
We're two sides of the same coin,
Uh-huh.
I would say. And
Wow.
we're exactly 9 years apart, which is interesting because nine is a full cycle from a
Yeah.
numerological perspective. And yeah, it's just so interesting to, when you really think about it. It's like, oh, like we've done this together before. There's just no
Mhm.
way. And a couple years ago, we had a birthday reading, and we're not getting political here by any means, but it was really interesting because Nicole had an Akashic Records reading, and it spoke to her past life during the last previous world war and how basically like she came forth, she reincarnated. And I was like, oh wait, so like are we here for this timeline to see how planet earth evolves from like 3D to 4D to 5D consciousness because we couldn't get it together in the last lifetime? So again, like down the rabbit hole. But all this to say that like we totally have done life together before, and if you put our charts together, it validates that from, you know, the synastry perspective.
Oh, we've never talked
Mm.
about it, have we?
We
I'm
I don't
sure
think
I
we
know you've
have.
done it, but yeah, we haven't.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
that'd
don't
be
think
really interesting.
Yeah, so then like okay, like you have the whole astrological component and then there's this whole concept of like synastry and composite and it's like, well, what past lives do you have together? So it's like it's never ending, but yeah, we definitely have had past lives together for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Because I feel like you're both, for me, an example of soul contracts existing, right?
Hmm.
Because this is like, you're both born in the same family, and yes, everyone gets a different version of their parents, but in some essence, your environment was similar. And yet you have, different passions, you've taken different paths. So it really makes me kind of believe more and more into, okay, you both have a unique soul contract that you came into this world. And of course, it's aligned, and perhaps it has been aligned in past lives too.
Yeah, I almost think that my path was very different than everybody else's. And I almost think like there are some things where people are like, I don't want to say like catching up, but like, oh, okay. Yeah, that was like right. Or like now they're kind of veering more towards like and the reason like I'm thinking is like everybody in our family, for example, like they were like business majors, right? And I was like, business, like that's so boring. I don't want to have anything to do with business, right? So I went and studied psychology. And then Gabby, is like kind of veering like away from business in the sense that like now more of her identity is around like astrology. And we kind of talked about, the like how those two can be like really similar. And there are just like some other examples that for like our family where it's like, well, I was the first one, and now other people are kind of like coming around to it. So, yeah, really interesting.
I also think too, like even through like examples within the family, right? Like certain aspects of Nicole's life have perfectly modeled like times and chapters in my mom's life, our mom's life, and my dad's life, and the same with our other sister, who's now a co-host on the podcast. And like I mirror my dad's path in a lot of ways too, but like I appreciate and desire aspects that, my mom, Nicole, and Brianna have in their lives now. So it's really funny to see how like our paths intertwine and how this generation, our generation, my sisters and myself, mimic what our parents have done in terms of like certain chapters that they've had. And I see that more from like a familial aspect. um, but yeah, it's interesting just to like tap on Nicole's point about like the business. I didn't know what I wanted to study. And I really feel like in time, like our offerings will be very similar, or like one will serve or perfectly hold hands with the other. And right now we're kind of just on our path in terms of like, okay, let's do the healing that we signed up to do. And like we'll circle back. Because I don't think it's a coincidence that like Nicole studied psychology. I have the business background, but we're so interested in both kind of work together, especially with like what we're doing within our own businesses at this point.
Yeah.
Curious.
Hmm.
Kabbalistically, there's this belief that we choose our parents. And this is a concept I first heard about by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he was sharing his experience where he was speaking to his daughter, and then, his daughter was complaining, and he turns around and goes like, well, you chose me. And that was so like interesting for me. And I took that to my mom, and I'm like, do you think I chose you? And I chose dad. And for me, I 100%, without a shadow of doubt, believe that I chose my parents because only they could trigger me into evolving and growing the way I did and creating that space for me to grow and evolve. And I'm learning my um like areas of, we call them tikkun and Kabbalah, like the areas that I need to change, the cycles I need to break. They are the perfect container for that. That's my perspective. But since you're both sisters in the same family, I'm curious about yours.
Go for it, Nicole.
I have a really hard time with that idea. Like, so we have different moms, and I think that there's no way I would have chosen like my birth mom. Like, why did I do that? So I really struggle with that. And yes, she did trigger me in so many ways to where like I had to grow and I probably wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have her as a parent, and for better or for worse, right? I could have been better or I could have been worse. But I always think back to like there's no way I chose her. Like there's
Mhm.
no way. So but I believe it. Like I know that I did to an extent, but it's just like, why? Like that was a dumb choice for me. So yeah, I kind of like, I kind of struggle with the concept because like it's true and it's not for me.
Makes sense.
Mm, yeah, and it's interesting just to touch on the astrological component. Nicole, but like, because so the fourth and the 10th house are mom and dad. And Nicole's placements in her fourth and 10th house speak to having a significant type of relationship with her mom. So, if you're wanting to look at it from the esoteric, like soul contract, there is validity that can be argued based on the birth charts. For me, it's interesting. I actually had that thought like a couple days ago. And, our parents are really intuitive in the sense that and we're speaking of mental health. I had a reading back when I like first had my awakening, and it was a written birth chart reading, and it was explaining how on the dad side of the family there was mental health concerns throughout the lineage, and like it was something that you'd be working on in terms of which is kind of clearing that energy up. And on my mom's side, that there were like astrologers essentially that were a few generations back. So I was thinking, I was like, why did I like, to be the first one really to have that awakening or at least be public with it and be like, okay, like I'm going to build a business around this specific topic. And like, why me? Like, if they had the gifts, like, why didn't they do it? But I think in a lot of ways, like and I don't have kids yet, but they say that like your children are your greatest teachers. And so I almost wonder if like us doing the work as siblings was meant to allow them to come into their healing because maybe they didn't have the opportunity to, especially as, first generation immigrants that just kind of had to
Hmm.
make it work from their root chakra, just basic needs, figuring it out and surviving in a new country. And then like, the millennials coming in and being able to heal that from an energetic perspective. So I think that generations that are coming forth, like our kids, it's going to be really interesting to see like what their healing is going to look like. I don't think my siblings have Gen Z kids. I don't know. It's escaping my mind right now. But one of the things that I recently heard was that Gen Z kids, because millennials are so aware of like what type of healing needs to be done, that Gen Z children are coming off a little bit more like entitled, or even if it's Gen Alpha, in terms of
I think
like,
it's probably Gen Alpha.
yeah, Gen Alpha. Okay. So that they expect certain things because, their parents that are millennials or were just so equipped to handle it from like an emotional perspective. So really curious, but I do think that we chose our parents to answer. Long-winded way of answering.
I love that because through your answer, you also reflected that the parents chose the child too, right? In a way that that child kind of like you became an opportunity for them to heal themselves too.
I think so. I think
Ha-
so. My inner, go ahead, Nicole.
I was gonna say, have you ever read Journey of Souls?
Have I?
Uh-huh.
Journey of Souls? No.
Okay. I highly, highly, highly recommend that book for everybody because it kind of speaks to soul families and this idea that we all kind of travel in these like soul groups and soul families together. So, yes, like you might have 20 people in the soul family and okay, in this lifetime you're going to play mom and in this lifetime you're going to play dad and I'm going to play son and you're going to play daughter. So, I think that there is that like agreement of okay, we're going to play these different roles for each other and we're going to teach each other these lessons. So I think that, and you're going to play my sister and you're going to play my brother. And so I think that, yes, it's not just that we choose our parents. I think we choose everybody in these soul families. This person's going to be my spouse and this is going to be my son and my daughter. So I think that there's a lot of like choosing and like appointing of roles in the lifetime. And that book really speaks to that like very, very beautifully.
Yeah.
Ooh. Gabby,
I
you were
also think
saying
that,
something.
yeah, thank you for that. So like for me, I'm thinking about, so my core wound, everyone has this in their chart and it's just specific to them based on, their birth information. It's my inner child. And I think that me having children is going to be very healing in its own way, especially for like my inner child wound. So I think just as like we can help heal our parents, I think our children also help heal us in a lot of ways too.
Mm. I'm definitely going to read that book, Journey of the Souls, Nicole. Thank you for that because I really do believe in that. It's funny. My dad and my mom got married when they were very young, 18 and 23. My mom used to love reading books, and I used to love reading books, but to the point where when my dad would come home, we would hide our books because we'd be like, oh my God, he's going to get mad that we're reading again. And me and my mom kind of, we had this like sisterly bond. So I'm sure we were sisters in a past life because the mother-daughter thing was never really there. And fast forward, this is a man who would make us like, we would hide our books from him. Fast forward, I think it was like 7, 8 years ago. I was living in Dubai at that time, and he came to my house and he said, have you heard of Veen Deer? And I'm like, who? He's like, Veen Deer. I'm reading his book. I'm like, you mean Dr. Wayne Dyer? And yes, I've been trying to get you to read this book for like 20, 30 years. Mom has been telling you. And so I was like, I called my mom. I was like, you will not believe what he just said right now.
Hmm.
And it was such a shock. But, if maybe if I wasn't there or my mom wasn't there, he would have never been open to
Hmm.
Dr. Wayne Dyer and the spiritual world.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that. That's so cute.
Yeah. So that brings me to my last question. And I know we're coming towards the end of our time, but I think it's a really I would love to see your perspective on it. Intuition versus protection. So, you know how we say like tap into your gut. Like there's this energy within you, the self that is all knowing. And so sometimes when we're like reflecting on certain things and we're going within, the question now is this my intuition or is this a protective mechanism? Is it a trauma response? And Nicole, I'd love your take on it from a therapeutic perspective.
I think that in order to really kind of suss out, is it intuition? Is it anxiety? Is like really getting quiet with yourself, like, through meditation or whatever it is, and like tapping into, okay, like what are my yeses and what are my nos? And like really feeling what that feels like in your body. Okay, so do I want this today or do I want that today? In a moment, like, for simple things, do I want this for breakfast or that for breakfast? Do I want to wear this outfit or that outfit? Not for the big decisions, right? You really want to like practice really slowly and tap into what that feels like in your body. And then over time, I think it'll help you feel the intuition versus the anxiety easier. And also, one of the things that I remember just kind of like listening and like really practicing and like, oh yeah, that is really true, is intuition is always going to be really calm, and it's probably not going to make sense, right? You're going to have this thought. I remember years ago I had this, I was engaged at the time, and my partner was going to go out to like grab water or something. And just kind of out of nowhere, I was like, I don't think you should go right now. Just very calm, very whatever. And he said, why? I said, I don't know. I just don't think you should go. And he said, okay, like then I won't go. And, we didn't hear about anything bad happening. Like there was no major accident, but there was something in that moment that told me, don't let him leave. Like he shouldn't leave the house right now. Versus, oh my gosh, like what if something bad happens when you leave, right? That's going to be the anxiety of like, no, but if you leave, what if someone tries to break in? Or if you leave, what if you get in an accident? That I think was like the difference. For me, it was just a very calm, like, don't let him go. Okay. And it's hard sometimes to tap into that when it's something big, right? Should I leave this job? Should I go full time in my business? Should I take this other job? But I think really taking that time to get quiet with the little things in life, your outfit, your clothes for the day, what you want to watch on TV, I think that's a good way to kind of like practice and see, okay, like am I having these anxious thoughts about something bad happening? Then that's probably your anxiety versus do I have these other thoughts that don't really make sense? That's probably going to be your intuition because your intuition never makes sense. Right? I mean, how many times have we had something and it's just like, what doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to listen anyway. And that's usually when our intuition's like speaking to us.
Wow, so powerful. So you discern between the two from like how it feels in terms of is it calm or is it chaotic? And
Right.
also you start with something small and you kind of expand the elasticity of intuition internally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you said one other thing. Oh, it doesn't make sense. Intuition doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, right? I mean, how many times has something came to us intuitively, like, that's weird, but okay. And then it's usually spot on, but didn't make any sense in the moment.
Hmm. I love that. Gabby, what's your take on it?
I think everyone's intuition speaks to them a little bit differently. I think more or less it is more calm than it is loud. At least that's maybe kind of how I think it should be, because I think if it's
Hmm.
loud, maybe there's a little bit of fear interlaced with that. But I do think that everyone has it. And I feel like the importance for identifying like how your intuition works with you, how you receive intuitive messages. Some people just know, some people hear, some people see, some people feel. I think just tapping into that is so important, especially in today's time and age. And I think as we progress and we see just the development of AI and more use of technology, I think that's more important now than ever, just so you know, like what's true and valid for you, even if it doesn't make sense to everyone else. And I don't know that it needs to make sense to everyone else. So
Ooh, I love that.
Mm-mm.
Mm, follow-up question for you, Gabby. Can human design help us figure out how intuition speaks to us?
absolutely. Yeah. So astrology is one of the modalities that's a foundation piece to human design. And I think astrology is more the feminine component, whereas human design is more the masculine. But human design is quite literally the permission slip, the how to, in terms of how to navigate, how you move, how you best move in this world, in this lifetime. Whereas you can totally get there with astrology, but I've only been able to, like, in my experience, the astrologers that have been in the game for like 20, 30 years are the ones that are able to speak to the exact specifics of how to that human design provides you with. And I think that just comes with so many years of study. So human design, I think, is the literal how in terms of how to tap into your intuition, which energy centers are the ones that you're going to be receiving information from. And yeah, I think that's where I'll leave that.
Amazing. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining, for
Thank
sharing your
you.
Thank you.
insights, your wisdom. How can the audience connect with you?
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Gabs.
Nice. Oh, okay. So you can find us at the Spiritual Sisters podcast. You can find Nicole at the Nicole Christine. You can find me at Agua Astrology. And all of the links pretty much mimic our names and the podcast and our business names. And yeah, just come hang out. Come take a listen.
I love that. I'm going to put all of that in the show notes so people can access it with more ease. Once again, thank you so much for coming on, for diving into these complex um, topics and, kind of holding space for them to take place.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Speak soon.